So I'm going to try to do the next in a batch of 3. So I've got 3 different covers lined up. This one, I already did a lot of work on it, so you can see a lot of the different layers. I'm going to break it down and show you what I've done, and then we'll clean it up a little bit more. So basically, let me remove some of this stuff, and you can see what it used to look like without all the layers. This is kind of a young adult dystopian, and one of the things I didn't mention earlier was that the younger the audience, the more design, the more you'll have a lot of detail or bright colors. An older audience will probably keep it simple. However, this is almost what I started with. I think I showed you when I was doing the background layers that I had this background, which I thought might look good enough. Looked basically like that. This is normally, like in a lot of covers, you'd look for a girl with a more dynamic pose, but in a lot of dystopian covers, it'll be a really simple girl staring straight at the camera. Pretty simple background. This is actually more of a post-apocalyptic rather than a dystopian. A lot of dystopian covers will have something super clean and simple. For example, something like this that's just, you know, it looks kind of military or futuristic sci-fi. Depends a little bit if it's, you know, what kind of dystopian it is. So because of the plants and stuff, this actually looks a little more post-apocalyptic. I probably could have put more of a post-apocalyptic figure. She's definitely in modern clothes, which looks a little weird. That's why this is actually what it was originally, but I just thought she looks a little bit too clean for this background. So I added this layer, which is just a layer of mud. You can't really see it, but it's just mud basically. I just Googled like texture layer. And then I put a clipping mask, which is right click, clipping mask. And then I just changed my blending to subtract. So all I was trying to do is give it some darker texture. I didn't even do a super job cropping this out and fixing it to her jeans, but mostly it looks fine. And then I started adding some additional layers because I wanted to, it looks a little bit too cartoonish, this background. I wanted to try to make it look a little more realistic. I started with this one, which is just, you know, rocks and water, but it looks pretty cool to have it inside the building like this. And then I tried to add in this picture, which I've seen around a lot. This could have made a really cool background just like that. It's kind of this Egyptian background. So I'm tempted just to use that for something, except it's so distinctive. You're going to see it on other book covers, which I didn't want to do. So instead, I was trying to just use it as a texture layer with soft light. Oops, let me go back a little. So it looked like that. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it does make that background a little more interesting to have those big icons on the walls. And then I thought, if I have a gas mask, maybe I have some poison gas or something seeping in. So I added just this green smoke layer. I don't love to have the perfect symmetry. On the other hand, it does kind of look, it adds a lot of movement coming off over the side like that. It might be too much. It's really pretty bright. But like I said, if this is a young adult sci-fi dystopian, you can get away with brighter colors and stuff. And then the next thing I did was I added in these layers. And so this is just, that's what it looks like, something like that. And I set it to screen, and then I duplicated them so that it's even brighter. I'm not sure that this kind of looks fractured because I broke it. I could try something like to make it look like it's just one long piece if I line those up a little bit better. And I could even try to make these bigger somehow or fill up more space, depending on how I want to do it. That also kind of helps a little bit with the symmetry. That might be too much. I'm not sure that I really like that. It's going to depend too where I put the text later. But let's leave it like that for right now. It's a lot. There's a lot going on. Might be a little too much. The other thing I did was take this background layer, which is basically just bricks. It looks like actually I can see the logo here, so that means I still have to go and buy this image before I use it. I must have grabbed the wrong version. But I had set it on color dodge, so you don't really see the picture. It just adds the lighting a little bit. It brings out the lighting, which could be pretty strong. And then I don't actually love this sky up here. It draws too much attention away. It's too bright. So I thought what I could try to do was just delete this part from the sky. And that way I could put in something behind it, some stars or something. I don't really have a great solution yet. I tried to put these stars in the background with this little moon, but you almost can't see it. It's too small. I might have to delete more of this, and then I could try to put in a big full moon or something, which would look pretty cool. So this part, the background's kind of done. I'll probably do a little more work on it. So then we need to fix the lighting on the character a little bit better. I did already add this texture to her pants. I probably need to add something over her shirt as well, which I was trying to play with, but didn't do a great job. So the other kind of fun thing we could try to do, I took this smoke layer, which is the same as the smoke layer for the green, but just to make her look a little more interesting, I did subtract and I did a clipping mask. So now it's like kind of a tattoo on her skin or something. So it looks kind of funny, but if I put it in the right place, and I could even try fooling around with the colors. So I may not necessarily use that, but my point was putting something there just kind of makes her more interesting. I could even, put a tattoo or something a little sci-fi. I could turn her into a cyborg pretty easily, but that's a bit too much. This is definitely more of a dystopian rather than hard sci-fi. And then I was trying a few different gas masks. So this one kind of fits in her hand, kind of looks like she's holding it. So that kind of fits in with if this was about DNA, gene hacking, and a poisonous toxic landscape or whatever, something like this could work pretty well. So then I try to do some of the same thing with the lighting. Actually, let me first go up here. You can tell that the lighting on her really doesn't quite fit. So this is when I could go up to my color layers. And I want to make sure that they're on top of everything. So for example, you can see what a huge difference this makes. And that doesn't work because it's behind the character. So in some cases, you'd have to put it behind like that, so that she's normal, the background is colorful. And then I could just take this color layer and play around and change the whole scene or setting, which is kind of fun. But we also kind of need the lighting to be a little better on top of the character. So I could play with a really light color overlay, or even one of these gradient overlays. And you're going to have to pick out the right blending mode to make sure that, you know, everything kind of looks natural. This one actually I kind of like because it takes away a lot of the saturation. It makes it a little more understated and darker. But what I'd probably do is just have a color layer where the opacity is not very strong. And I could do overlay or soft light. And that way it's just a little bit, it's subtle, but there's a little color on top of the girl, which makes her kind of fit into the background a little bit more. And then I would go to my add new layer and do some of the lighting effects that we did earlier. There's already quite a bit of light behind her, so I might just try, oops. To bring out some of the light in the foreground. The light's a lot stronger on this side, so I'd pay more attention to kind of over here. So I put one layer behind her and then another layer on top. I'm going to actually duplicate this one, see how it goes. Anyway, so that's pretty subtle. Doesn't make a huge difference. But it does kind of help her look like she's in the scene because this light's coming from behind her. Lighting is tricky. You kind of have to play around. And then the other thing that I might try is if I go to a new layer and I'll add a little color like I did before. So there's not a super strong green light over here. But if I change this to a pretty bright green, and a pretty small brush, this may not work, we'll see. So if I put this on top of the girl and I do a clipping layer, it looks kind of like that. I could change the blending modes. And then I would have to go back and delete some stuff. It doesn't really look good on this far side. It kind of encroaches too much. This would be a rim light, so the lighting would be like just on the very edges, but it wouldn't really come in very much. Almost like an outline. So that's not very well done, but you can kind of see the point. I could also try with layer effects if I go to layer, layer style, outer glow. You kind of want it to, you want your character to stand out, but you want it to be sort of subtle, so it doesn't look, you know, too much, unless she's kind of radioactive, which she could be, but may not be in this case. Anyway, still not perfect, but you can kind of see how she fits a little bit more in the scene that way. That's probably enough for this one, at least right now. This next one's actually going to be a lot easier. The colors already work really well. It's really natural lighting. I'm just going to position her a little bit better. It's kind of tricky because there's this really nice light space up there on the back. So I want to make her look about on scale so that she fits into the landscape, but also stands out a bit. So this one might work a little better if I go to layer, layer style, outer glow. And this will just be really soft white lighting. Yeah, it's sort of hard to fit. You also have the option, if it's not working, of just making it a lot bigger and losing the legs. Which could also work depending on the layout. I might try something like that. And then I could also just very simply try to go to adjustments, brightness, contrast. I don't want to overdo it with the contrast, which will bring up the saturation, but I can make her quite a bit lighter, stands out a little bit better. And then I do the same thing with the layer style, the brush, and try to add just a few points of light that's kind of encroaching so that the light seems like it's kind of coming around a bit. Oops. Something like that. That might actually be too much. It may not even be necessary, but it does really give that, you know, the soft glow. I might try the blending a little bit, see if that makes it any better. Or just reduce the opacity. So that way it's there, she stands out pretty well, but it's subtle. This was the original. This is with those two effects. Not a big change, but it does make a difference. And then this one's pretty much ready to go. I wouldn't do a lot else. I'm not entirely sure that's the positioning I like. The more I set her back, the smaller she's going to be to fit into the landscape. I could also just move the landscape up. Like if I figure out where I want the model to be, I could position the background better. And I think the reason it looks kind of funny to me is that we've still got some overlay layers on top that I think are removing the colors a little bit, possibly. So because it's a really bright day, this vignette layer on top, it doesn't quite work. I think it's probably better without it, although like this one, which is an overlay, does bring out the center brightness a lot. I could even do it like a lot more if I wanted it to really pop. But it's pretty, like it's a soft natural light, so I don't really want to mess with it too much. Anyway, something like that probably works fine. I could also, if I wanted to, go back and play with the colors and just see if a color wash is going to enhance this at all. I still have too many layers in this one. I'll have to go back. Because she's wearing brown, I could have changed the colors of her clothes. I could change the colors of the background to make her stand out. Like if the background is more green. And then I could also just change the hue and the saturation. But I kind of like the natural colors in the background, so I don't think I'll do that. Instead, I could just go back to the original image and go hue, saturation, increase the saturation, make it a little more bright. And I could change the hue. So if I wanted this like a really vivid natural green or like fall colors, either one could look really cool. But I probably like this kind of earthy tone of the original. Anyway, that's kind of a cool cover. I haven't really done very much to it. I just added a little bit of lighting. So I'll probably save that one. One final little trick that works sometimes is an inner glow. So I just went up to layer style, inner glow. I was talking about the rim light or the outline lighting. This can seem a bit unnatural because it'll be the whole thing. It'll go down to like her boots. So you may actually have to duplicate the layer and have one bottom half of the character that doesn't have this feature. But in terms of like the lighting in the background, and I may not want to have it like over her hair and stuff, but you can kind of see this is basically just an outline. And I could make it, you know, in some cases, if you have really strong backlight and you just have a little bit, it's almost not noticeable. But it does kind of help her stand out from the background a little bit. And because there's a lot of strong natural light behind her, it sort of works. But maybe not on all the character, like on her shoulders, on the gun, it helps. Just a nice little bit of an outline. But down here on the boots, doesn't look as natural. This is the third cover that I was working on. It's not ideal. I'm still a little unsure about how this works. Because she's very modern, very urban fantasy. The background looks a little bit too Tomb Raider or Crypt. it might work for an urban fantasy, but urban fantasy is more usually a cityscape. It's a cool cover, but you want to be as clear as possible about what genre it is. So you want your title, text, and your cover, background art, and your character to all communicate different parts of the same genre and get a little bit clearer on the genre. She's got a lot of awesome detail. I like the boots, so I kind of like the position she's in now. Although this could also probably work if I make it bigger so you can really see all the cool detail. I kind of like that skull behind her, so if you position her the right way to make sure that the background is coming through. So we might play around with that a little more. She has a really strong lighting here on the side of her face also, so it doesn't quite work with this background because the lighting is behind her. Real quick, I'm just going to go to outer glow. And then this background I did really rough. It probably needs some extra polishing. I could add in my smoke layer depending on how much, fantasy or magic there's going to be. Definitely makes it a little more dramatic. I could add in some extra lighting. So what I tried to do was just move that smoke layer around, and then I duplicated it and flipped it and changed the colors. I actually pretty much like this pinkish glow. Her hands are positioned like this, so it's okay to give her, some magic. I could have probably put some of that magic on top of her hands. So I added this element and it looks okay, but now I don't really love this particular background. So I was playing around with something else. I found this other background. I mentioned how she's got really strong lighting, so it works a lot better to have this moon right behind her. Even if I change the hue and the saturation a little bit to try to match that color since it's a little more blue. That just makes it look more natural. So something like that could work. But then I also found a different background. This one, which I think might look really cool. I had added this little bit of texture on the sides. Oops, if I can find that. So these two layers were just a little bit of texture added on the sides. If I removed those, because they don't quite fit with this scene, I might play around a little bit more with this background, which looks basically it's just simpler and it helps the magic on her hands stand out a lot better. So I might keep that one and see what I can do with it. I did also have this alternative background, which I'll put up here on top, which was a cemetery, which also looks pretty cool. But what I can try to do is maybe use, I was thinking like I'd use this background for another book in the series, but I could try to just, could try to kind of blend them together if I erase some of this sky. Or I could put one to overlay or multiply or something to try to keep some of those branches up there, which look good. And I would have to move the moon. So right now, in this picture, there's the moon over here. It's you can't really see it, but it's there. For now, I'm just going to erase all this. What I was really trying to do is just get that foreground. And I could even, let's see, I could try to take this one that I had as the background and try to just take out that crypt here. Even maybe some of these skulls. I'm not sure how well that's going to work. So now that is still there, and then I have this other little bit of foreground, which I'll probably put up here on top. There's a little bit of detail missing, like there should be some ground here, so I still need to add something to fill a little bit of that in. And then the color's a little bit off. What I was saying with the moon, I'd have to find a moon layer. So this still isn't perfect, but I did add a moon up here. There's a lot more light coming on this side, so it makes more sense that the moon is over there. But then that means that I have to flip my character around because the light's coming from the other side. And then I also darken this foreground quite a bit. It's the same layer, so it's got some texture, but it didn't look good with the casket, which is already pretty dark. So to make it look natural, I just had to darken the foreground. Now it kind of looks like it's almost too dark because of this really bright moon and the lighting. So this is what it looks like so far. These ivy branches I kind of like, but they're too bright green, and that's because of the moonlight. The colors in the scene aren't going to be really colorful because you're not getting daylight. So I would just desaturate those a little bit. And then I might try to add some more planty stuff material in the front. So I've added some texture down here with different plants and flowers and stuff. I added the skull, which I think looks okay. It's sort of subtle. The lighting is not too bad. The only thing is, actually, because this light here is pretty close to this stuff, and this is a really strong pink light, so actually there should be some pink lighting around here also, which is a little tricky. I could try to add a new layer and put it on top and just paint some lighting in. I changed my color to a pretty bright pink with a small brush. I could probably use a different brush that would work better. And really I'd have to put like all this stuff on the same layer and then do a clipping mask. But even so, I wanted to kind of see if this would work a little bit. If I just go to overlay, doesn't exactly work, but kind of does a little. I could also go to filter blur. So I'm basically just blurring those brush strokes I made a second ago. I'm trying to get them to look a little more natural. Anyway, I could probably be doing more with that, but you can already kind of see, like just a little bit, it fixes the lighting in here to make it look a little more natural. Not a big deal, but do try to think about where your light's coming from and what color it is. And so then the other thing that I did was I wanted to see if I could play around with the background a little more in terms of like magic and lighting and stuff. I added a little bit of light here coming down from that moon. It's blue, so I would have to think about whether I wanted to change that color a little bit. To fit in with what I've already got going. Or to contrast. But mostly, I actually don't want the color there. I just want a little bit of lighting to show that that lighting is coming through. I tried a different moon. I think a crescent moon might work really well, but maybe I'll play more with that later. Tried adding some more smoke. So this is just another smoke layer, but you can see how it kind of, especially since these two are so symmetrical, adding more smoke really helps everything stand out, gives her a lot more structure. If I zoom out a lot, you can see that like she doesn't really stand out from this background with what's going on. I could try to fix that with a really strong rim light around her. If I can find that model again. So she already has a little bit of an outer glow. I could try just duplicating it so she has more outer glow. I could also try image adjustments. No, layer style, inner glow. So like I mentioned earlier, in most cases that's not going to work because it's going to be too strong. So I could play around and just have it, you know, really light. But even so, I'd probably have to figure out exactly how it's hitting and where it's hitting. So as an alternative, that smoke was simple. It's a little bit too much. On the other hand, it also looks pretty great. So, oops. I could play around with the positioning and, you know, where it's coming from, angles. And I could also, if I wanted to change the color, I like the contrast with that pink, but I could just, you know, make it the same color kind of. You don't really want, you know, more than one or two main colors. The blue's kind of okay because the background is already blue. But, you know, if the moonlight's coming down through here, it's a little weird to have this strong pink and the strong blue. Instead, I'd probably make this a little pinkish, or I would just desaturate it and keep it kind of like gray-white. And then I might also change the opacity just so it's not quite so overwhelming. And I could probably also, well, I could figure out, you know, if it's above which layers or behind which layers. So now it looks okay, except kind of strange because there's all this stuff going on behind her and nothing going on in front. The other layers I was playing with were this one, which is kind of neat. It adds these kind of sparkle effects. I'm not sure that the blue works. So I could try changing the coloration a little more. The yellow almost works really well with the pink, but with that blue also, it's just too much going on. I'd probably keep it pretty purple. A lot of urban fantasy is going to be navy blue and purple. Those are just kind of the colors. So if I keep it sort of pinkish purple, it's still there, it stands out, but it kind of fits in with the background image already. Like it's not super noticeable, it just adds some dimension. I did try this layer, which is a bit too much. And then you could also add some sparks, which would look like that. I'm not sure that those really look great coming off her hand. It might be a little bit too much. The other thing you can do with sparks, which I'll probably do more later, is just make them really big and kind of have them coming up around the edges. Just adds a little bit of movement. You want to be kind of careful with the placement and make sure that it's not too much. And then I would probably change the color. That one almost looks okay with the blue because the blue and the pink make a really good contrast. I've already got like a lot of pink going on. So you just want to kind of keep track of, you know, your lights and your colors and what looks good together. It doesn't totally have to look natural or realistic as long as it looks good. But if it's, you know, too flashy and really looks cheesy or unrealistic, that can be a problem. Like that gold is really eye-catching, but it just doesn't fit in the scene. And the pink fits in the scene, but it's kind of just too much. It doesn't add any contrast. I'd probably go with kind of this color blue. And I could play around with the positioning more if I didn't want, you know, too much of it. Like just there's a little bit, but it's not really overwhelming. It just adds a lot of movement. And then I could duplicate that. And put some more sparks somewhere else. You'd probably want to at least rotate it a little bit just so it doesn't look, you know, exactly like a mirror copy. So like that, it looks all right. There's a lot going on. It's too busy and too complicated. The lighting's not quite natural. I would need some more lighting effects on top of the character. On the other hand, once you add text, people aren't really going to study that background anyway. I mentioned that I always do too much detail in the background, but really most of the background is just going to be like, you know, all they're going to see is the color and the character and the title. People won't really see these tiny details or all the work you did anyway, which is why, you know, you might want to try to keep it simpler and not go overboard with the magical effects and stuff. This could have even been a stronger cover, possibly without all those extra stuff, just because then there's more contrast with what's going on behind her. So that's something you'll want to consider and think about, like how much is too much. And then the final thing that I might do is go back to my color layers and just see, you know, how this would look if it was totally in a different color. The other nice thing about color layers is it'll pull everything together. So, you know, it'll make everything seem like all this stuff on the bottom is all one color and the stuff on the top is all one color. Just makes it look like more like one scene. So you can play around a lot once you've basically got all the details. And this is also really how you can do a series, because you could have the same background for a series and just change out the model 3 times, but then each time, if you just adjust the colors, you can have a really dynamic, different style. And I could also try, if I wanted to keep my magic the same, if I put the color layer behind the magic, then that magic will stay pink, but everything else will change colors, which may or may not be, you kind of have to play around and see what's going to look the best. And I'll show you even if I go back and add in all that extra smoke and sparkle and stuff. The other nice thing about a color layer is it might have been too much before and it didn't really make any sense. It's still kind of too much, but once you add the color layer in, nothing's quite so distracting because it all kind of looks like one scene. And then you could play around with, other color layers, other gradient layers, different kind of blending modes. A lot of that stuff I think I mentioned before. Probably I will add the typography first. I'll finish up the details a little bit more. And then like at the end, I'll play around more with my colors. I might ask my audience to vote on it and see which one they like. This one, for example, is a gradient. It's a half gradient layer, so it's only a gradient on the bottom half. It's set to color burn, which brings out, it makes it really strong and it adds a lot of contrast, but might be a little too much. Subtract actually looks pretty good there because it just really darkens the bottom, makes it a lot more moody. I'd probably have to put that on top of the character to darken her a little bit too, or else she doesn't fit in the scene. And then that's a bit too much. But that adds a pretty nice like green bottom, a really nice contrast with the color of the sky and the green bottom. Doesn't really fit the moon because the moon is such a different color. And then I still have this vignette layer here. And I've got this dark gradient, which just darkens the bottom a little bit. Anyway, so there's a lot of fun stuff we can do with colors. We'll probably come back and take another look at it once I figure out what my text and typography is. I also really want to know my genre because, depending on this is what kind of urban fantasy or what kind of paranormal academy or whatever. Other genres, other books in my categories might have a really strong color scheme. So I might want to take a look at not just what looks good, but what other people in my genre are doing.